Joining me right now is Cory Belyk, CEO.
CEO, Executive Vice President, and Director.
You might as well be a director then. You got to have a say at the board, right? So we're here to discuss Canalaska today. The company's been around now for 20 years.
Yeah, really since 2004 is when it got going. Peter Dazzler, the former CEO, sort of resurrected it and turned it into a uranium vehicle focused on the Athabasca Basin. And yeah, so it's been around about 18 years proper as Canalaska Uranium, focused in what is the Saudi Arabia of uranium, the Athabasca Basin.
Absolutely. And you guys do have a partner there called Cameco. Don't know if you ever heard of them before. Of course you have.
I've never heard of Cameco before.
Yeah.
Spent almost 25 years of my career with Cameco and some of their purchase companies. So yeah, I got a long history with Cameco, and they are our partner at our West McArthur project, which is really right now our flagship project in the Athabasca.
Okay. Before I let you fly on the property there, I digress there. I got to get back to the capital structure. So we know what your share count is there. What's in the till?
About 17.4 million today, after a successful raise in early November of $10 million.
And how quick did you close that?
We closed that literally before I got to work. We actually had to up it from 8 million because by the time I got to work, I was told that we're full and over subscribed, so we bumped it to 10. And
what valuation were you when you did that raise?
It was all flow-through money, but our valuation was in and around 40 cents at the time, and we did a flow-through. I think the main flow was around 52, and the charity flow was up around 70 cents. So we're probably got some pretty happy shareholders coming.
Did you catch a little bit of flack for doing that much money at that valuation, or?
I don't think so, and the reason is because we got so much on our plate that looks so positive, specifically at West McArthur, among others, that it was pretty easy to get investors excited about what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I think they saw the opportunity in front of us in Q1, and they want it on board.
They want the money.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's get into the drilling then, because that's what's really going to drive this market, obviously. So exciting things are coming out.
Yeah, we got a brand new discovery, just literally 6 months old at West McArthur, our Pike Zone. We drilled some very high-grade mineralization, 9 meters of 2.5% in the very first hole. Follow-up holes drilled mineralization over various widths as high as 25% uranium. And that's just very hard to do in the Athabasca Basin. So we're on that right now with 2 drills. Mm-hmm. We're waiting for the first target tests imminently, and we're looking for some very good mineralization to come out of this program once we test the unconformity, because all this mineralization was in the basement. We haven't even got to the ideal target, which is the unconformity. That's the age difference in rocks where these big Athabasca deposits like Cigar and McArthur form. And so we're testing that with our first two tests with the 2 rigs, and I think one of the things is we've changed our ability to drill this target because we've gone from wedging to get to target to hold the drill hole to now directional drilling, which is really oil patch technology. But I think we've got the ability now to really do what we want to do and really spend our shareholders' money very wisely to see what kind of target we have in front of us at Pike Zone. It sure looks correct.
Yeah, you've got this confidence about you. I interview a lot of executives. I'm not saying they're not confident, but I guess if Cameco was my partner in there too, and given how close you are to one of the largest mines in the world for uranium, I would probably be that confident. But so obviously that's the game plan. They're going to let you go poke some holes around, you see how much bigger the deposit is, and they probably need pounds down the road, and probably not that far down the road, so that would make sense. So is that why I can sense this aura coming from you?
Yeah, it's partly the market and the need for the Eastern Athabasca Basin. The milling infrastructure does need some Tier 1 assets to be found because there aren't any after Cigar Lake and McArthur River. There's Tier 2, there's Tier 3, and no Tier 1s. And I think that's the key. We've positioned our portfolio very strategically to be right close to that infrastructure. We can drive year-round from the McArthur Key Lake Haul Road, where all the McArthur ore goes, down to the Key Lake Mill. We've positioned ourselves where we can drive in there year-round to work. Like literally drive off that haul road. And our partners Cameco, they've got the infrastructure just within 10 kilometers of this Pike Zone. And anything we can find that is Tier 1 has an immediate home at Key Lake, because when McArthur River restarts, which it has actually just restarted, it has about 15 years of mine life left. That's its reserve base. It does not have additional resources to move to reserve. So you have to find it today to feed Key Lake, or Key Lake is shutting down.
It costs a lot of money to start it back up, so you don't want that to happen.
Absolutely. So that tells you something about the market that Cameco believes is present or coming, because they've had it on hold now for a number of years, and rightly so, in a down market, waiting for utilities to come back to the table for long-term contracting, which they've started to do. They felt now is the time to move McArthur back on stream producing uranium, but again, that starts the clock to a finite end. And if we found it today, let's say Pike Zone turns into a Tier 1 asset, it's almost too late to meet the needs of Key Lake. So that's McArthur River. You've got Cigar Lake producing uranium, and has been producing uranium through this down period. It has a mine life of about 6 or 7 years left. So imagine a world where you have 3 of the mills in the eastern Athabasca Basin not producing uranium. That's going to start, well, it's already started because Rabbit Lake isn't producing uranium. Then you've got the McLean Lake mill shutting down in 6 or 7 years post-Cigar. Then you've got the Key Lake mill shutting down 7 years after that. 20% of current global uranium production offline in the eastern Athabasca within the next 15 years. What is that going to do to your market? Incredible.
Well, especially, I'm bullish on uranium as a whole,
Yeah.
outside of just Canalaska. So I do believe that there's going to be growing market share for uranium. Governments now are starting to talk about. We'll get into that, because I can go down that hole with you.
Sure.
Keep it in house with the company there.
West McArthur. Pike Zone. Yes.
Pike Zone.
Yes.
Where might you also bring the drills?
We are also going to be drilling in 2 weeks in our Key Extension project. And this is a brilliant project for us. It sat in the hands of a prospector through the last uranium cycle 15, 18 years ago. Never got drilled. It's never had a drill hole on it, but what we believe is present on the property is an extension of that Key Lake fault. That's the fault that hosts the Key Lake deposits. It's produced 150 million pounds of uranium right near Cameco's Key Lake mill that's accepting the McArthur ore. So we're on that structure, and what we'd hoped through acquisition of this property as part of a very, economical deal, let's call it, is that we gain access to that structure. We did some geophysics. We developed 3 brilliant geophysical anomalies that look every bit the correct size, orientation, proximity to this structure that we'd hoped. And that's just a dream state in terms of setting up for a drilling program, which we're going to be starting in about 2 weeks' time at Key Extension. The very first drill holes into these targets, they look correct. They look exactly like NextGen's Arrow deposit area before they intersected the mineralization. Scale, intensity, proximity are all correct. We need to go drill it and show ourselves and our shareholders what we might have on the plate. And that project is 10 kilometers away from that Key Lake mill, right off the road. So it's positioned, again, strategically around all that critical infrastructure that can take advantage of any success that we can have at the Key Extension project. It's one of our best in our portfolio outside of the Pike Zone.
Well, obviously it's a great strategy, right? You're staying with Cameco there as a potential partner. You're kind of just saying, hey, we're over here drilling, Well, they know what you're doing.
They do.
And the infrastructure's there.
Correct.
So those are 2 things that investors are going to look for. So I like that. That checks off some boxes. You need competent management to execute on all these things. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your experience, why you're the right man for the job, how you got here? Let's hear that.
Yeah, I'm competent, I hope. I've been in the business 30 years, 30 years in the uranium space. I started in 1994 with Orano, actually, the French giant, and then after that short contract, I joined Uraners Exploration and Mining Limited, which is actually the discoverer of the Key Lake deposits that I just talked about. So, those are 2 of the big companies outside of Cameco that were active in the basin at the time, and Cameco actually bought Uraners. So I like to joke that, and it's just a joke, Cameco bought Uraners for me. That's not the case, obviously. They bought it for the assets. I'm not that arrogant. I'm very, very humble. But the point is, my roots in the uranium space span Orano, Uraners, and Cameco, and the Cameco portion with Uraners was almost 25 years. And, that 25 years wasn't just an exploration as a project geologist.
Right.
It also included 5 years as chief mine geologist at the Eagle Point uranium mine, right near the Rabbit Lake operation. So I learned a lot about the geology of these deposits, the intimacy of the complexity, if you want to call it that, the nuances that you need to look for finding these things. So after making a discovery around Eagle Point, 100 million pounds, called the O2 Next or North Extension Zone, which is an interesting story in itself. But I moved on to join exploration again on the business development side, where I worked closely with some of the business development or corporate development folks with Cameco, traveling the world.
There's that name again.
Traveling the world.
Cameco.
Big part of my career and life, and a wonderful part of it. So they afforded me the experience to travel around the world looking at all different deposits, Africa, Australia, Mongolia, Asia, the US, and in Canada, and evaluate them from an economic perspective. So I've looked at a lot of things. It's afforded me, through that experience, the opportunity to join a company like Canalaska and apply that knowledge. Now, through that 30 years, I've developed relationships. And interestingly, how I came to joining Canalaska was actually a relationship that was built sitting on the opposite side of the table. I worked on a deal with Peter Dazzler to bring Cameco into the West McArthur project because they saw what was happening on their side of the boundary at their Fox Lake deposit, 70 million pounds of 8% uranium, and they wanted into West McArthur because they always believed, Cameco always believed, that the faults trended onto Canalaska's property, and I was tasked with getting Cameco involved.
So like,
happened.
did Cameco just drop you into Canalaska and say, hey?
No, not at all. That's not the case. I was caught up in the layoffs of Cameco when they downsized drastically and cut their exploration from north of 100 million a year to 10, mm-hmm. and that's fine. After a lengthy career there, I was ready to do something else anyways. So I joined Canalaska because Peter and I developed a very close relationship, being adversaries, working toward that common goal, and we had a healthy respect for each other. So it was a no-brainer to join Canalaska from a management perspective, but also from a portfolio perspective. I always thought their portfolio was second to none, let's put it that way. Okay. So it was an opportunity to join them, and that was a great period of time. We've since made some management changes where Peter has stepped back from the CEO and then president's role as part of a transition into just on the board now, which is a wealth of experience still accessible to the company. And then I've managed to bring in the last couple of years some key talent. One of them I worked with at Cameco.
And you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a bell.
It's kind of like cash cab. Anyway.
No, I like it though, right?
It's awesome.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So again, big part of my career, but I developed relationships, and I've been able to bring in some talent from Cameco that I wanted to work with again. And first and foremost is Mr. Nathan Bridge, and he's my VP of Exploration, and he's a young, very talented geoscientist that has roots in Cameco of 12 years, and we always wanted to do something special together, and this was the opportunity to join myself at Canalaska and do something special. And guess what? Within 2 years, he's gone out and led a team toward discovery of the Pike Zone in West McArthur, and credit to him and his team for that success. I mean, their talents, their history, their knowledge has all resulted in this outcome, and it's fantastic to be working with this team. Second to none. I'd stack them up against anyone globally to go out there and make these discoveries. And I think too often in negotiations or deals, everyone's looking to win. I prefer to look for making the pie bigger for everybody. And I think if you have that mindset, the competitiveness can be leveraged from other parties as well, along with yours, to build something that's truly special. And that's the way I kind of approach all deals or all relationships, is looking to build the pie bigger for everyone. We all can have a piece. We can all share. And I think that's a healthy outcome. So
I think it's a great attitude to take to the table, my friend.
That's what I try to do all the time.
You want to talk macros?
Let's talk macros. Let's go.
Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Where do you think the market share is headed for uranium, and why?
Yeah, well, uranium, it's an opaque market. It's hard to read, but what I will say is that from my perspective and my background with companies that we won't name again for the ding, I'll just say...
Cameco.
Ding. I'll just say that, I've always been one to sort of not pay attention to the spot price and think about the long-term contracting, because to me that's key. In order to develop some of these assets that are out there in the world, uranium assets, you're going to have forward sold uranium, and that comes in these long-term contracts. Utilities haven't been signing them for a number of years, but they're starting to come back. They're starting to come back now. And, I think some of the contracting now is probably in the $50 range, maybe higher. The spot price is around 50, but I'm always looking for a long-term contract because your spot will always be north of that. So Inventories are way down for utilities. They've dropped from, say, 5 to 7 years in inventory down to 1, maybe 1.5 years.
I got to challenge you there. I can't let you go off. Because I'm trying to figure that out. So how do you get to that number?
It's opaque.
All right.
You have to look at all the sources. It's tough to find, but it's out there, and you just need to start looking at at what the utilities need to do to get back to their former comfort level. And if you put that all together, you're looking at replacing about 1.5 billion pounds of uranium into that market. That's just really the U.S. alone. So something's got to give. When a reactor's on and producing power, it stays on. It's an expensive proposition to slow it down. They don't want to do that, so they're going to have to procure that uranium, and literally at any price, because it's such a small portion of their expense. It's about 5% of a reactor's cost to run is fuel, so it's somewhat irrelevant. So you can literally pay anything for that uranium, and that's I believe what's going to happen. So if you want to bring new production into the stream, if it's not tier 1 like a MacArthur Scar, or maybe some of the Kazakh deposits, you're going to have to go and try and forward sell tier 2 uranium that's out there. And there's some in the basin that are like that, but their prices are around $65 to $70 per pound break even. You have to forward sell north of that, probably in the $90, maybe $100 range a pound into long-term contracts to incentivize that to come on stream. So that's kind of where it has to go for new mines.
Yeah, it seems like 75, 80 is the new 50 because of inflation. Is that accurate or no?
It's accurate, and the numbers I'm sort of using at 65 or 70 are probably outdated 10 years ago. So maybe it's north of that. So let's say it's got to be north of $100 a pound spot and long term. What is that going to do to the uranium market? What is it going to do for a company like Canalaska with a little over 100 million shares outstanding, with an asset like Pike Zone that's generating incredible results and looks every bit like a tier 1 from its alteration, its grades, and its smell? It smells right. And that, I know that's going to sound weird, but high-grade uranium, when you're close to these big deposits, smells like steamed Brussels sprouts. And that's the smell that we're getting from our core last fall. That's what I anticipate we're going to be working on in the next few weeks at Pike Zone, is something in and around that high-grade mineralization that we've already hit grades of 25% that looks every bit like a tier 1 asset.
So the best way to market the company is to just do as many site visits as possible and say, smell.
Well, it's hard to articulate to shareholders, but I've been telling shareholders that this core stinks. It smells like steamed Brussels sprouts. And my time at Eagle Point, when we got into those very high-grade stopes, those very high-grade uranium mineralized zones, it would literally shut the mine down. We'd have to air it out, and it could take hours to ventilate the mine. And you could smell it in the offices. You could smell that organic, rotten Brussels sprout smell. And it's something that's very hard to put in text. But when I get geologists phoning me from the field that they put the core in the core shack and they got to air it out for 2 days before logging it, that tells you you're close to something important. And that's what we believe we have at Pike Zone, and we're out there drilling it right now. So it's going to be an exciting Q1 for Canalaska in what appears to be a great market for uranium moving forward.
Yeah, better than last year, hopefully.
Better than last year, but I think better than the last cycle. The last cycle was short and built on weak fundamentals, literally, weak fundamentals. This one, having been in this business 30 years, this is a different cycle. It has the geopolitics under it that's creating havoc. It's got security of supply from that geopolitics. It's becoming an issue. North American supply of uranium is going to be incredibly important. Russia has 40% of the conversion and enrichment capacity. What if that goes down? What is that going to do for these utilities that need the fuel to generate the clean electricity that comes from uranium? And there's going to be a lot of stress there. Not to mention the application of newer technologies, old technology, into civilian use of small modular reactors. That is going to be a game changer for the market. It's not fantasy anymore like it was 2 years ago. It's reality. It's happening in Canada. The Darlington plants are putting in 300 megawatts of SMR technology, producing clean electricity from that SMR technology by 2028. An incredible story unfolding.
Yeah, and you know what? I live 20 minutes from Darlington, and a little bit of inside information. The Pickering plant has always, I used to live right by it, and people, my neighbors and everything would talk about, oh, it's shutting down in a couple of years, eh? It's not shutting down.
No.
And lots of whispers coming out of there internally about prolonging the, keeping it online, and why won't they? There's just too many reasons to keep it on. I'm here to let you pitch my audience on the company, but I will help you or indulge in pitching uranium as a whole because I love it and I'm invested in it. And the reasons why is I don't know, I can't really see a clear path to anything else that we can use scalable, that's clean energy source. Obviously hydro, but the grid is kind of maxed. Wind and solar, I mean, I'm not in that game, right? So yeah. I think the market share is going to grow.
We need a source of domestic supply. We're going to make sure that you can achieve that as a producer. And that was big for the U.S. producers. But I think when you look at it in the context, it's not just U.S. When you also look at those kinds of reports, and maybe that one in particular, it's looking at it from a North American perspective. So that brings the Athabasca Basin into the fold of domestic supply for the U.S., of which, that's the largest set of nuclear utilities, I think, anywhere on the planet at just under 100. So, or reactors, sorry. So we're really looking at North America. So that support doesn't just extend to U.S. domestic; it extends to North American domestic, and the price has to change to incentivize that production to come in, whether it's U.S. or Canada. And all I'm saying is that Canalaska in its portfolio, if we have a tier 1, it displaces all that, and importantly, it has a home. It has a home at Key Lake. It has a home at any one of those 3 milling operations in the basin. We're in the eastern Athabasca. That's not to say that any discoveries in the west aren't great. They're just not able to access that infrastructure in the east. And you value maybe $4 a pound some deposits in the west of the basin. In the east, the last cycle they're valued closer to 10. And that's the upside for us. That's their strategy, is to stay around that infrastructure as much as possible and give anything we can find a home. And it's a special time in front of us. And back to the needs of society globally. I went to the WNA in September and listened to the Director General of the WNA, World Nuclear Association, SAMA, stand up there on the stage and say we may have to quadruple our nuclear fleet globally, whether it's SMR or large-scale reactors, in order to achieve the goals by 2050 that we need for clean energy production and helping the environment on a global scale. Yeah, that is just unbelievable. Right. Unbelievable that there's talk of having to quadruple the nuclear fleet globally. Like that, what is that going to do? It really means we've got to find a lot more uranium, and whether or not you find tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, all I'm saying is that we're looking for tier 1. We think we're onto a tier 1, and that tier 1's got a home if we're right.
When I say these names, what comes to mind?
I want to see my shareholders make as much money as I and the board and the team can possibly deliver for them. We're in the game of not producing uranium. We're in the game of finding uranium and selling it to the highest bidder. So our trick, I believe, is to go out and show our shareholders what we have at West MacArthur or anywhere within our portfolio, to give them the knowledge to be able to adequately make a lot of money from any transaction that we can drive from our success. So, what is that value? As high as possible for the shareholders. And I think that's what I'm tasked with as a CEO to deliver for them, and safely, of course. But I think that's the game. That's the game we're in. That's the game we want to play, and that's the result I want for my shareholders, to make as much as they can from owning Canalaska.
Yeah. Cory, thank you very much for joining me on the morning drive.
Thank you, Carl.
If you're at PDAC and there's some more news out, we'd love to discuss it and get a little bit more into detail. But that's a pretty good intro for my audience anyways into Canalaska. And they already know lots about uranium, so that's good. Signing off, we'll see you later.